was born in Arizona, but she moved to San Diego when she was about 3 years old. She attended school here and graduated from San Diego State, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degree and became an elementary school teacher. And then she went into administration and became a vice principal and a principal. Maria has worked in the community, in education, educating families, and also grassroots. She has received numerous awards for her volunteerism. She also was honored by the San Diego City Council for December 3rd being Maria Garcia Day. She also had a radio show called Vecinos, and where she discussed the Latino contributions in San Diego, and she also was also honored as one of 6 women by State Senator Ben Wessel for her historical preservation of life in Logan Heights. She's also was a Latino San Diego Union-Tribune Latino Champion of the Year awardee, and she also has done so much with the Chicano Federation and with CAVE. She was a CAVE president. If you don't know what CAVE is, it's the California Association of Bilingual Educators. And so it was a pleasure for me to be able to meet her. I also had the opportunity to go with her to Logan Heights and then to Chicano Park and to the cannery, the tuna cannery. And she is just a wealth of information for, about San Diego's history. I learned so much more from her. And I'm so excited for her to be able to present today about historic La Colonia Eden Gardens, and I'm very grateful that she chose to include La Colonia the Eden Gardens in her book, We Made San Diego. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Maria E. Garcia, author of We Made San Diego. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in. I really appreciate this, and I didn't recognize the person you presented, but that's fine. I love history, and I'd like to go to the first slide because I don't want to waste much time and talk about the book cover. Betsy, are you? I guess we're having a little problem. Uh-oh.
See what happens. Can everybody see?
There we are. There we are.
And then I'm gonna spotlight Maria for everybody. There we go.
This is the book cover. I used various signs to show that we're everywhere in San Diego. I wanted to get away from the Latinos' life is in Barrio Logan or San Isidro. You can see by these signs, we're everywhere from La Colonia, Eden Gardens, to San Isidro, El Cajon, and in many locations in between. My point is that we're all over the city and we contributed to the city. Next slide, please.
I'm here. Hold on just a second. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My old computer is not behaving. Let's see.
That happens.
I know. Oh, I may ask my helpers to do this. Let me see if I can make this work. Ay. Okay, I'm going to stop my sharing and there we go. Okay.
Okay. This is Max Hernandez. Max grew up in La Colonia, not by choice. He was born in Palm City. And for those of you who are not familiar with where Palm City is, it's near San Isidro, Otay Mesa, out that area. He was orphaned at the age of 7. A drunk driver hit his parents' car head on, killing his mother, father, and a sister as well. His uncle, Ramon Rincon, a newlywed, brought Max and his siblings to live with him and his wife. The family lived in Eden Gardens. The Rincon house was very small, and there was a period of time where Max and his brothers were sleeping in the garage or even the chicken coop. But I just think it's amazing that this family took on another 4 or 5 kids. Next slide, please. Max was very, very talented. He went to San Diego High School. He would play golf. He was a caddy at the Santa Fe golf course. People said he was so good he could have been a pro. According to the family stories, he did not have the money needed to buy the clothes that he needed to play golf. So if that was ever his dream, which I really believe because he played golf the rest of his life, it just couldn't be. Okay, next slide. Guillermo and Ramona were able to purchase the Bluebird Cafe, which was also had a bar and a pool hall. At one time, every one of their kids grew up working there. Max and his siblings worked there. Across the street, kind of kitty corner, was Tony's Jacal. As soon as they could, the boys would all go to the golf course at Rancho Santa Fe and collect golf balls. Next. This we took from the Eden Gardens from the Solana Beach Historical Society. The Rincons were able to purchase the Bluebird Cafe. At one time and another, when they, as I said earlier, when they grew there, his siblings all worked there. Let's go to the next one. This is a picture of Max, who became a community activist and a successful director of a SED program. This only piqued my interest as to how and why this little community, less than a mile from Del Mar Racetrack, ended up with a Latino population and these streets named in Spanish. I was fascinated that there were so many streets in Spanish. The one on the left is Nick Hernandez, a Vietnam War hero, Max, and the far right is Howard Holman, another community activist. Next. As I said, curiosity took me to Eden Gardens. I dove around and I found streets with names like Hernandez, Cota. I had no idea there was such a rich history in this little alcove. We stopped at Tony's Jacal, and the first thing that caught my eye was the little league pictures on the wall. Next. There's see, those are the street signs I talked about. Next. You can see, okay. I was scheduled to work on a book on Mexican-American baseball players in San Diego County. Thanks to the COVID, it's been put on hold till probably the end of summer. But I was looking at the baseball pictures. That's really all I was looking at. I had no plans to write about Eden Gardens. So I posted on my Facebook about my visit, and a young woman named Gina Gonzales responded. She would be willing to put together a group to talk up to me about La Colonia and their experiences. To be honest, I wondered how much this group would be willing to share with a perfect stranger, because I had never done a group interview. I prepared a form asking them several questions. Next. This is the baseball pictures that caught my eye. I know it's not very clear, but when I do the baseball book, I will be including several pictures from Solana Beach. Next. This is the little group, not so little, because everybody was talking. I have to tell you, it was very difficult. Talk to somebody else. Mary Helen Castro Simpson, whose parents brought their home on Castro Street, remembered that her parents were very involved in the church. They had a statue of the Virgin Mary, and it would be passed from one house to the other, where they would spend 3 to 5 days praying, and then it would move on to the next house. And again, the prayer meeting would take place. It was the rosary. This was a big gathering for the people of La Colonia. Her father, Ray, was a part of a musical group called Los Gilantes that played at parties in La Colonia. That he also played it at after mass at her grandmother's house. They would play the guitar, sing. Most of her aunts were singing. Family activities were always part of that community. Okay. Next. The little girl on the left is Gina Gonzales, who has been very helpful about sharing her memories or visiting her grandmother and her uncle. She's really been nice to share the stories. And again, I was a stranger, so more than willing to share. Next. After the breakfast and the brunch and the listening to the stories, we walked down to the park. And in the park, there was this beautiful mosaic tile. And on that mosaic were names like Hernandez, Peralta, Dominguez, all part of La Colonia. Next, please. After we finished, we walked over to the park, as I said, and I kept looking at the names. I was fascinated to find so many names in Spanish. Next. This memorial was dedicated in 1997, but I do want to mention this. During World War II, La Colonia had a very interesting situation because they sent so many of their men to fight. So a lot of the businesses were left unattended. And it also left a lot of moms wondering, or wives wondering where their spouses were. Next. I did 3 slides on the names because I wanted people to see that we have fought in every war there has been. Latinos we've given blood and our tears and everything else. Oops, where'd it go? I'm lost, you guys. Oh, there we go. I don't know what happened. Next slide. Again.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, names of people from La Colonia. The wars have been devastating. One more slide with just names. And again, I just used the names to emphasize that we have contributed to this. The next. This is a slide from the early days of La Colonia. You can see there's not a lot of density and there's no Interstate 5. It's just the houses, the streets. But again, everything in that community centered around family and churches and doing a variety of things. Okay, next. This is Sarita Gonzales. Excuse me, this is Dr. Sarah Gonzales. The picture is not in the book since I only received this picture a couple of weeks ago. My reason for including this picture is her house, which is where Tony's Jacal is now. Her father, Simona Gonzales, was a cousin to Tony Gonzales. In true Mexican style, instead of calling it a second cousin, in the Mexican culture, we usually call them tios and tias, aunts and uncles. So I wanted to include Sarah because she does have part of the history. Her parents rented a house from El Señor Pancho Garcia. Sarita was a babysitter for Teresa Gonzalez's children. She went on to earn a doctorate from Harvard. She was an associate professor at California State University at East Bay and a board member in Hayward, California. So this is one of your success stories that came from the Colonia. Okay, next. This is a class picture from the Americanization School. Teresa and Ray Rincon met in elementary school. Their school had 3 classrooms, 1st and 2nd grade in one room, 3rd and 4th grade in another room, and 5th and 6th grade in the 3rd classroom. When it was ruled that segregated classrooms were not allowed, the students were sent to Central Elementary. Teresa remembers being punished for speaking Spanish at school. Let me say, this was not unusual. Mexican and Mexican-American kids throughout the country were punished for speaking Spanish. Punishment was anything from being hit, having your mouth washed out with soap, or even made to strand in a trash can. This led to a generation not speaking to their children in Spanish. I'm not even going to talk about the psychological message given to kids about their native language. Next. This is the winning Little League team. And again, was taken when I was still thinking baseball and not so much history of La Colonia. But I think it's important to realize that the parents and the families in La Colonia gave a lot of time to develop these kids. Next. This is Tony Gonzalez's baseball field. Probably one of the few baseball fields, especially in that era, named after a Latino. Okay, next. This is Loretta Angula Carrion. The beautiful lady was queen of las fiestas patrias. La fiesta is what is celebrated on the 16th of September for Independence Day, 16th. I was going to put who she was related to, but as I started doing the little family tree, if she wasn't your grandmother, she was your cousin, she was your aunt. She had a lot of roots in La Colonia, but I wanted to show how beautiful she was and the attire that she's wearing. Next. This is Pete Gonzales. All the Gonzales boys were avid horse race bettors. They would often walk home discussing how that horse came within 2 inches of winning that race. That was one of their pastimes. When Pete died, his daughter Gina assumed she would be given her father's ashes. Instead, her uncle took the ashes and told a small group of family members to meet the next morning at the house, but very early. There was a gentleman named Chuckles Hernandez who had a key to the gate at Del Mar. The family proceeded to the track where Pete's ashes were scattered at the finish line. Think about the next time you see the flowers blooming at the racetrack. Think about that story. Next. And I'd love to share little stories like that because those are kind of family stories that stay within the family. Pete and Archie were very close and supported the 11-member household. Pete is no point me, second from the left, and Archie is second from the right. When they would get in trouble with the law, they would often give the others names. Most of their infractions were directly out of our gang movies. I'm not going to kid you. You know, the mischievous things that you would see boys doing, these boys were very good at doing. Next. The lady who's sitting in this photo is Tilly, who we will hear more about later. As I said earlier, Archie and Pete were mischievous. You want to think of them as Mexican-American our gang characters. Today, some of their pranks would put them in juvenile hall. But for an example, they would block the road and start a fire, only to laugh when the fire truck could not get down the road because they had blocked it. As older men, they would love to sit and talk. Remember when? This is it was a favorite pastime of them, remembering all the mischievous things they did. Next. This one I included, this is Tony Gonzalez's sister, Angela. She was married to Ralph Chavez. I wanted to see how formal they are. Look at the dresses, their formal attire. Things were done very formally then. Okay, next. Someone is asking for an explanation of the Americanization School. Those went out all over. Amanda Cheney is the adopted daughter of Clotilda, or Tilly, and Harold Cheney. Tilly was one of 12 children, 10 of whom were boys. Tilly shared with Amanda that she never played with dolls because she was always a caregiver to her brothers and sisters, as well as her nieces and nephews. Baby Amanda was in foster care for 6 months before she was adopted. Okay, next. Harold was a professor at Palomar College, and Tilly was a system analyst. Harold died when Amanda was a year old. Really, what she remembers about her father is stories that people have told her. But Tilly taught Amanda the importance of an education and being able to be independent. She would say, you can lose it all in a blink of an eye, but your education will stay with you. Next. By the way, Tilly was very, very determined to get an education. I'm including 2 letters in this presentation. And the reason is that throughout the different people I interviewed, there was letters, either for them to get credit or citizenship or to be recommended for a job. So I wanted to include this. She had applied, and the letter recommendation reads, I am happy to declare that these people have been good, loyal, well-behaved people and have raised a fine family of boys and girls. 3 of their sons are in service to our country. This was very common. Next. This is not someone from the Colonia, but again, a letter of recommendation for credit and employment. The man is earning $3.86 per day, and it's assuring the people that he's very well to be trusted. Next. Another letter written for Mr. Sandoval when he applied for credit. He worked for the railroad, and the letter states, Mr. Sandoval is an honorable, hardworking person, adding that he would be trustworthy and fulfill his obligations. I know that today, can you imagine a credit company or a store accepting a letter from one of your neighbors or one of your employees that just says, you know, he's trustworthy, go ahead and give him credit. Okay, next. In addition to the regular information, height, weight, the things you would expect to find in a certificate of naturalization, you will see that this one states that Loretta has a scar on her forehead. I cannot see it in this picture, but this is written here. Next. Mr. Gonzalez's certificate shows that he had a faint scar on his finger. I find this so interesting, the little tiny thing. Of course, this is way, way before computers, but even little lines that would say some things. Okay, next. When on one of my visits to La Colonia, I wandered around the church. I was trying to visualize some of the events that took place because by now I had spoken to people who talked about the wedding or talked about how they had a family gathering in the church hall. I did find a nun and I did speak to her, though she did not grow up there and hadn't been there that many years. She was pretty familiar with the history. Next. This lady is Cipriana Gonzales. Many years ago, the diocese wanted to close the church and the community rallied around the closure. Leading the charge was Cipriana. The Vatican finally designated St. Leo's as a mission, saving it from being closed. What is amazing to me is this small community took on the diocese. Of course, it wasn't her by herself, but she led the charge and it was a group. And to me, even more amazing is that they won this against the Vatican. I just can't even imagine being brave enough to take it on. Next. This is the couple from their first wedding at St. Leo's. This is Carmen and Luis Montes. Carmen was born in La Colonia in 1929. As a child, she attended the Americanization School. Ben was born in Encinitas in 1926. Luis and Carmen met at a dance at the Silver Slipper Dance Hall in Oceanside. Carmen and Luis were married October 5th, 1947. Luis was active in the GI Forum, and was chairman of the annual fiesta at St. Leo's. By the way, Lisa's parents are this couple right here. And I also want to say that Lisa remembers church fiestas where Desi Arnaz and Desi Jr. performed. Next. This is the groundbreaking for the kitchen at St. Leo's Church. The Gonzales family has always given to the community, and Tony Gonzales is holding the shovel. They continue to do things in the community. Today, or not today, but this year, they sponsored meals for the first responders. They're really a very active part in the community. Next. This is Simona Gonzales, who was born in Encinitas in 1925. She was the 8th of 13 children. Her father, Jose Montes, worked for the railroad, which resulted in Simona and her family moving from one section housing to the other. As a child, she lived at various locations between Victorville and San Diego. Section housing was basically the same: 2 rooms, an outhouse, and an open outdoor kitchen. And this was true in Sacramento, San Diego, wherever there was the train. In the winter, family members took a bath in the tina, a wash tub in the kitchen. Her brothers were responsible for cutting the wood that was used to heat the water. When they lived by the Santa Fe Railroad station in San Diego, she remembers hearing a lot of yelling coming from a baseball field. The baseball field was Lane Field with the Pacific Coast League Padres, but she never looked over the fence to see what was going on. Okay, next. This is the Montes family. When World War II began, they were living in Elvira, which is located in Rose Canyon. They also lived where the Mormon Tabernacle Church is now. Of course, those days it was considered the middle of nowhere. They had to ride a Greyhound bus to get there. During World War II, trains would pass through the loop there. Her father insisted that when they heard the train whistle, they have sandwiches to feed the troops. When they were running out, they would take a tray full of sandwiches, lift them up to the people, and the soldiers would reach out the window and grab a sandwich as quick as they could. And this was something they did on a regular basis. Okay, next. This is Simona and her little brother. She remembers the county of San Diego would send a dentist once a year to check their teeth. She probably remembers it because the dentist told her she had perfect teeth. Another day of the year, the county would send a bus to round up the kids and take them to county hospital to have their tonsils removed. Next. The Santa Fe Railroad sponsored a victory garden. It was a contest, and her family won. Her father was in charge of the vegetable garden, and her mother took care of the flowers. Simona says that's how she learned to eat vegetable. Simona is the young woman with the basket, holding the basket. Now, you can see how close the railroad track was to their home. Next. This is Simona and her two daughters, Priscilla on the left and Rachel on the right. Simona started the first Girl Scout troop in La Colonia. Her husband, Frank Gonzales, became a coach for a Little League team who went to the playoffs in 1959. I can see that the support for this team was a joint effort. Frank had to work late. He would get off work at the gas electric company. So guess who was responsible for picking up the boys, for taking the equipment to the baseball field, to find someone who would help the boys? I feel that Simona never got the proper credit she deserved for this winning team. Next. This is the original Tony's Jacal, located at the Del Mar Airport. When Catalina, Tony's wife, had her baby, it was decided that the distance was too far for the restaurant and it was moved to Valley Center. The pilots followed them, keeping a new location thriving. Soon the jockeys from the racetrack also followed. Willie Shoemaker was often a guest there. Next. This is a very young Teresa and Ray Rincon. Teresa met Ray when they were both in grammar school. Ray remembers that the Mexican and Mexican-American kids were punished more severely for most of the minor infractions in high school. He says the principal's office was always full of Mexican and Mexican-American kids. Both Ray and his twin brothers were in trouble for such infractions as walking across the senior lawn. And I bring up the discrimination because I see the discrimination as hurdles. These were things they had to jump over to accomplish what they have accomplished. One of the forms of entertainment was garage parties. These were parties held in garage and advertised around the community. La Colonia drew people from Escondido, Oceanside, and Carlsbad. Garage dances charged a small fee, sometimes a quarter, other times 50 cents. One of my favorite ways to determine the entrance charge was to measure your waist. A tape measure was used. If you had a 30-inch waist, you paid 30 cents. Teresa's dad would usually pay for the band. By the way, these parties were held all over San Diego. And just as a side note, one of the performers in the parties in Southeast, the National City area, was often Rosie from Rosie and the Originals. Okay. Now, Teresa's dad bought her a truck. And even 70 years later, Teresa and Ray cannot agree who taught her how to drive. Ray says it was him, and we'll leave that argument alone. they would fill the back of the truck with kids to drive to school. You can imagine, I mean, in those days, and we've all had that experience if we're over 50 years old, of riding no seat belts, just kind of standing in the back of the truck. Ray has, when he was 15 years old, he got a tattoo on his hand. Sorry, next picture, please, on his arm with Teresa's name on it. The only problem was that Ray was always told by the teacher, sound the word out. So he sounded out the word for Teresa. Unfortunately, the name is misspelled on his arm, but it's still there. Okay, next. Teresa and Ray. I took this picture, and more than Teresa and Ray, I'm emphasizing that the tree in the background is 100 years old. All of their children, all of the Rincon kids have worked in the restaurant at one time or another. Next. This is a picture of Ray's mother and his sister Malena. What a beautiful woman. And you can see the house. I wanted to include it because it's just so much of what was part of that history. Okay, next. After Ray and Teresa married, Tony, Teresa's father, taught Ray how to tend bar. Both Tony and Ray insisted that all guests be treated the same. Even celebrities had to wait for a table. Ray says Tony did not care what color you were, what your money was, what church you attended. As long as you paid your bill, you were welcome. The rule of no special treatment held true when a call came for a special group that was coming to the restaurant. Soon, several FBI agents walked in, followed by J. Edgar Hoover. Ray applied the no special treatment to them as well. But the restaurant has had such guests as Elizabeth Taylor, Mickey Rooney, Willie Shoemaker. And today, several of the guests come just to show their children or grandchildren the picture of them on the wall when they played baseball. Next. Ray Jr. started at a very young age, cutting lemons and punching holes in olives. Today, he runs the restaurant, and very proud Ray Sr. says he's doing a very good job. Next. The day I had lunch with the women from La Colonia, I walked to the park with Lisa Montes. As we walked, she would point out certain locations, and that was probably the best part of the short walk. She would point out the creek and spoke of as their playground. It was where you built forts, where you enjoyed the sweet taste of sugar cane. In the book, there's a chapter written by Elisa titled "The Sounds of My Neighborhood." She writes about hearing the chickens in the early morning hours. In the days before cell phones and the internet, there was an Eden Garden whistle. You could stand in the front yard and whistle, and your friends down the street would know it was time for you to come and join them. Next time you see Lisa, ask her to teach you the hometown whistle. My personal choice to write a history about La Colonia would be Lisa, but of course, I know that I shouldn't be pushing that, so I'll just leave that alone, but just a suggestion. Next. Marianne and Manny Aguilar. Marianne has very deep roots in La Colonia. Her mother, Antonia Abril Gonzales, and her father, Frank Gonzales, were born in La Colonia. Her grandmother came from Guanajuato, Mexico to La Colonia in 1918. She remembers all the little small businesses were there. The house she grew up in is a house on both Castro and Gonzales Street. Manny, on the other hand, grew up in Chicago and was orphaned by the age of 1. He was raised by his grandmother and his sister. He came to San Diego as a young sailor. When they met and started dating, Marianne brought not just a boy from outside of the Eden Gardens, but a boy who came from Chicago. They married in 1931 at St. Leo's. Both of them are very open about the problems La Colonia faced in the 80s. The entire United States was seeing a raise in drug abuse and gang activity. They were involved in solving some of the problems in the community. In 1910, they formed La Colonia de Eden Gardens, an organization that runs community garden, annual summer youth camps. They collaborate with others to serve the community. So they have continued their work in the community. Next. This is this quote to me is very important from Cesar Chavez. Preservation of one's own culture does not require contempt or disrespect for other cultures. And I think that's really important when people start saying, oh, why do we have Chicano studies? Why do we have Black studies? Well, we haven't been included in the history books. And until that day, we need to talk about our history. We not only for our own kids, but for other people to understand the contributions that have been made. Okay, I'm open to questions.
Awesome. Let's see. Okay, Maria, we have a question from someone that
I haven't
wants to
got
know.
Archie's yet. But
What
this
was
is
that?
from-
Hello? The question is, please explain to us more about the Americanization School as it
Okay.
relates to the racist policies and the reason this community was settled.
Americanization schools were really segregated schools. They were where the Mexican kids went, or they were not integrated. Look up Mendez versus the Board of Education, or the Lemon Grove incident, and you'll learn more. But it was a form of segregation, and that was hidden behind we need to teach them English. It didn't matter if the kids spoke English or not. It was to teach them English.
Mhm.
Quote unquote.
And we also have a comment from Dr. Daniel Ramirez, who is also has roots in La Colonia, the Eden Gardens. He got his PhD from Duke University. He also graduated from Yale. He's a grandson of Cipriana Gonzales,
Yes.
and professor at Claremont Graduate University. He wanted to, hold on a second. He wanted to also say, made a comment in the chat about, 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. He made a comment about the community pillar. Cipriana Gonzales lobbied the school authorities against the segregation policies in the 1930s, 2 decades before Brown versus Board of Education. So that was a comment, but not so much a question.
And it's true.
Mhm.
The Mendez and La Colonia, both of those were way before Brown versus the Board of Education.
Mhm.
Okay. Next.
Another question he had was because of the linguistic punishment and trauma in the Americanization School, his father, Luis Ramirez, son of Hilario and Maria Ramirez, insisted that his children speak English better than the gringos. And he said, we did, but at the loss of a command of Spanish.
This
The
story
Spanish
came
language.
up. A person who also shared this story was Teresa Gonzales, about how her dad would always, when she'd say, well, with a name like Gonzales, how come you don't say we're Mexican? You say we're Americans. And this little argument or discussion went on for years between them. Finally, as he got older, he said, because it was so hard for us to make it or to achieve, and how we were looked at, I didn't want you guys to have the same problems. And that story is true from one side of California to the across the nation. How sad that a lot of these kids lost their language and lost the ability to talk to grandparents. Think of the stories that were lost when they couldn't communicate with their grandparents or their great-grandparents.
Mhm. Another question from Dr. Ramirez. In your research in San Diego communities, hold on a second. In your research in San Diego communities, 1 second, let me get out of this. Where are we at? Okay. 1 second. Okay. Here it is up here. Okay. In your research in San Diego communities, what stories have you encountered about non-Catholic churches? Because remember, in La Colonia, there were 2 churches.
And it's funny, I've encountered 2 different sides. One of people that are very angry at the non-Catholic churches because they feel that they took away their culture. One thing the Catholic Church did, they started incorporating, whether they incorporated a lot or a little bit, but like the Our Lady of Guadalupe celebrations, things like that. So it drew the people in. I don't know what their motive was. It could have been just to draw the people in, or it could have been inclusion. But I found a lot of that. I found some people felt that they were looked down on. Growing up in a community and I'm thinking of one particular lady, where everybody was Catholic and they were Protestants. They did not have an easy, because the kids themselves were teasing them and making fun and, you know, telling them they were going to hell and that kind of thing. David, if you'd like, we can have a conversation.
I'd love for the two of you to meet. There's another question from Mark Manny. Did the construction, let's see, did the construction, let's see, a second.
Of Interstate 5, I just saw
Yes, Interstate 5 split or border the community of La Colonia.
Yes, it did.
Yes, that's correct.
It did split the, but it's true. Again, start at La Colonia and look at Interstate 5, and communities were split. Look at Barrio Logan, between the bridge and Interstate 5, there was a huge split. This happened over and over again. And it's sad because some of these communities were thriving.
Yes. Yes.
Any more questions?
I think that's someone wanted to know if you talked to Ofi Escobedo. Ofi is from Carlsbad, from the barrio of Carlsbad. I know her very well, but I know that you didn't reach to that neighborhood, correct?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Let me tell you, this book was going to be 200 pages, you know, somewhere in there. And every time I interviewed somebody else, the book grew and grew and grew. And I would talk to someone and they would say, oh, you have to talk to so-and-so. Like when Gina said, this group, and then all these people were available to talk to. So the book is now over 410 pages, and I'll answer. I had expected it to be done now and printed and back sitting in my living room, and it's not. I'm thinking maybe the second week in March, and I hate to give a date because sure as heck it won't happen, but somewhere in March, and then it will be on Amazon and it will be available through me as well.
Wonderful. Someone has a question about, I think, gentrification and how's that going here in La Colonia, and people coming into the neighborhood, and you know, how's that working out with La Colonia and with the you know, the people, the original people here from La Colonia.
Some of the people I spoke to spoke about their dad wanted the property sold so that the mother would have enough money after he passed away or stuff. In other cases, it was gentrification. Lisa can probably speak to it more than I can, but you see this in all our communities. Go to Barrio Logan now and you see it. San Isidro has not quite experienced this as much, but it's also experiencing it.
Yeah. Also, we have another question about, are there more similarities or differences between all the communities you cover in your book? That's an interesting question. Good question.
Yeah, I think there's more similarities. And let me speak to that. A lot of the same experiences. Guys who went to war and thought, you know, they were called Americans when they were in Europe or in Vietnam for that matter. And they came back here and told, you know, you're just a dirty Mexican. And that happened more times. And I'm not saying in the 40s only. I'm saying after Vietnam.
Yes. And then the Father Gerard said, we have valuable archives about St. Leo's at the parish. So that's good. Someone wants to know, where did the name Eden Gardens come from?
Lisa, you will have to speak to that.
Yes, and I can answer that. That came from our developers that built Solana Beach. We had Colonel Ed Fletcher, who was basically the father of Solana Beach, and Eugene Batchelder. They basically named Eden Gardens to make it sound enticing for people to come and move to the area. So that's how it got its name. But if you are from this area, the original people refer to it as La Colonia. Not so much Eden Gardens. I mean, we do call it La Colonia the Eden Gardens, but if you're an original here, you refer to it as La Colonia, and you know what you're referencing. So So that's how I got the name. That was from the person that came to develop this area of so that workers could come to this area to tend to the fields of Rancho Santa Fe and the homes and the citrus groves and whatnot of Rancho Santa Fe. We also had lima beans here too. So we needed workers. We needed workers. They needed workers for this area. So Eden Gardens, that's how it became segregated, and it was primarily for Mexican Americans, or it was for Mexican Americans, and they named it Eden Gardens.
And a lot of the commonalities come from where they worked, working for the railroad,
Yeah.
working in the cannery,
Yes.
just different places. I saw my neighborhood past and partner in crime, Roger Casares, asked if I plan to do another presentations on it. I will do presentations on other communities when invited. Probably South Bay would be one, like it would be National City, Chula Vista, San Isidro area, not just one of those areas, though there's enough information on all of them.
Okay. We have a question from Gina Gonzales, who wants to know, will you be doing a book signing or an event here in La Colonia once the book is released?
I would love to, but COVID is preventing us from doing a lot of things. I love book signing because I love to hear people's feedback, but I also like to hear somebody else say, oh, this story, you know what happened to us? And those extra stories, even though they're not in my book, they stay in my head, even with an old memory. So I really do enjoy it when people share things like that. But I don't see how we can do it right now. But yes, I would love to.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think those are all our questions, Maria.
That's great. If you guys have any questions or anything, please feel free to contact me.
Thank you so much, Maria, for being with us today, and thank you for your time and all your time and your love for writing the history of not only La Colonia, the Eden Gardens, but all the different neighborhoods that you chose to write about, because it's your time and energy that and your love of history that's what's making it for our communities. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about our children, the importance of them needing to know their roots, their history. And we talked about how kids need to know where they came from in order to know where they're heading to. So thank you so much for everything. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I know it's been a pleasure for the Solana Beach Civic and Historical Society for having you today, and the community has learned a lot, I know for sure, about not only La Colonia, but different parts of San Diego. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have a tremendous history, and I really hope that the schools are sharing it with the kids. That's one of my goals.
Well, we definitely somehow need to get your book into our high schools and our colleges and in our public libraries as well.
Thank you. Again, we want to save this history. If somebody has one more question, I'll take it from you. I see, Pat, did you have a question or were you just waving? Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you guys very, very much.
I just want to add one more thing. If you would like to become a member of the Solana Beach Civic and Historical Society, it's $25 to become a member. We do have a website. I don't know, Betsy, if you can give them that website or the information, somebody can chime in. But we, are always looking for members for our historical society so that, we can continue to do the work we have and preserve our history. So we welcome you to join our society. Okay.
Thank you guys.
One more thing. Someone wanted to know where was the baseball field located. I think that was a Tony Jacal baseball field. That was right there on off of Via de la Valle, kind of near where the old, well, I guess it would be kind of where, I think, is it Red Tractons or where the Winter Circle is, right off of Via de la Valle, across from the Del Mar racetrack. That's where it was located.
And something else I didn't mention, and several of the people mentioned it, was sitting on the hillside listening to the concerts from the Del Mar Fairgrounds or movies. Again, they weren't seeing the picture as much as listening, but that was a pastime in the evening, was sitting outside and looking at that.
We're
Well,
hearing
thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Betsy, should I sign off or?
If you want to hang on for just 1 minute and we'll just
I'll
do
be
a
glad
little.
to.
Okay. I saved the chat, and so I will email that to you.
Thank you.